Hi, my name is Reverend Myra Brown. I'm the pastor of Spiritus Christi Church. I'm also the founder and organizer of SPARC, Spiritus Christi's Anti-Racism Coalition. We are a group of Spiritus parishioners, people from other churches, and the community interested in understanding and dismantling racism. What do? We share information and we educate ourselves in our own racial biases. We learn about systemic racism and its impact on all aspects of society. We participate in direct action and events to stand against racism. We support the Black Community Focus Fund and the Civil Rights Heritage Park by sponsoring an annual Rock Juneteenth 5K run and walk, and a jazz concert, and a Black History Month concert, and an annual speaker. And we volunteer to support the Rochester GBI, Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot Program. Behind me are members of our White Caucus, arm of SPARC. And we are here because we have a message for you. And I'm going to turn it over to them to share it.
As members of the White Caucus, the Spiritus Anti-Racism Coalition, we feel it is imperative to speak out about the outrageously inhumane treatment and subsequent death of a Black Rochester man. For too long, we as white people have been silent in the face of white people's continued desire to control Black and brown bodies in all arenas, including health care emergencies. The recent death of this man, after being kicked out of an ambulance, is yet another clear and tragic example of our insistence on the rules of engagement that render Black and brown bodies expendable. As shown in the recently released police and street surveillance footage, this man was forced out of an AMR ambulance, at which point he made his way to a nearby bench. There, unattended, he collapsed and fell to the ground on a freezing night. Footage shows him being ignored for an entire 2 minutes by both ambulance medical workers and police personnel. A little over 2 weeks after the incident, the man died.
A look at the recording shows policemen arriving on scene after 2 white female ambulance workers called for help in kicking the man out. The footage shows the back of the ambulance open and one of the 2 women standing outside the ambulance saying, "I don't know what's wrong with him, but he will not get out of our truck and he's got to go." The man tells the police officer, "I couldn't breathe, and you'd freak out too if you couldn't breathe." In response, the police officer says, "I hear ya. I'd probably try to control myself a little bit better." For both the ambulance worker and the police officer, a Black man's inability to control himself in a medical crisis is a sufficient reason to deny him complete assessment, oxygen, and a ride to the hospital.
However, we see a man sitting in control in back of the ambulance. One of the policemen says to him, "Sir, it's a wrap. Looks like they want you out." Looks like implies that the police officer does not know all the details of the situation. However, instead of telling the ambulance worker to step aside while they attempt to assess what's really happening and calling for cooler heads to prevail in a potential health emergency, the officer takes the white female ambulance worker's word as the final determination for her concern, which in truth was based on annoyance versus based on her accusation of assault. This occurs even after the white female ambulance worker states that the Black man approached her initially saying he drank water and couldn't breathe. She was annoyed that he grabbed her in his distress to get into the ambulance, demanded oxygen, and wouldn't let her go.
Here are some direct quotes from the raw video footage available on YouTube from the white female ambulance worker. Quote, "You told us you had pain from drinking water, and then you came at me, jumped at me and my partner and demanded oxygen, and you would not let go of me." Quote, "I don't know what he's going to do, but we are not taking him anywhere." After that, he made a last-ditch plea to the officer saying, quote, "Would you take me to the hospital, man?" As the Black man gets ready to exit, He is heard grunting and his voice is raspy. And in response, the officer says, "No." And then the white female EMT responded by saying, quote, "We tried to take you, honey, but that was just unacceptable. There was no reason for this and there was no issue." Then, as the man appeared to be rubbing a sore spot on his own shoulder, the police officer speaks more sternly to the man, "No games," and finally, "Get out." He begins to put on first one coat, then another, knowing that if he does survive shortness of breath, he still must face the cold. It's a white woman who has made the final call about who gets the privilege of being treated and transported to the hospital and who does not. It's as if the plea of a sick black man are on mute.
In fact, what's most apparent in the video is how alone the black man is throughout these moments, when help could have made a difference. He struggles alone with his two coats. When he steps down off the back of the ambulance, shoes untied, he is told where the door handle is. No one helps him. He is told what direction the sidewalk is. No one helps him. When he finds his way to the bench, viewers can see police officers and ambulance personnel walking around the sidewalk and near the man. No one checks on him. When he collapses and falls to the ground, still no one goes over to him. He lies on the ground alone until someone with a flashlight spots blood on the sidewalk. Only then does a policeman turn over the man and the ambulance worker runs to get something. Often, poor people who may be experiencing homelessness are treated with less respect and concern. Perhaps the assumption of his social economic status played a role in their interest in rendering or providing services for him. The black man here is rendered an untouchable.
As white people, we want to call attention to inaccurate, wrong, and potentially dangerous stereotypes that white people are still hanging on to. Black people must be inherently dangerous and hence reined in. Black people are inherently untrustworthy, and therefore white people will decide whether they are credible and need medical treatment. White people can inflict pain upon black people because black people can take it. White people can demand which behaviors black people must exhibit in order to be given medical treatment. White people can decide which black people live and which black people die. The EMS Code of Ethics to conserve life, alleviate suffering, promote health, and do no harm. That was not the lived experience of these workers, the patient, nor the police. The code that promises services with compassion and respect for human dignity, unrestricted by consideration of nationality, race, creed, color, or status, is a broken promise to a gasping black man. Reverend Myra Brown, pastor of Spiritus Christi Church and founder of the Spiritus Christi Anti-Racism Coalition, points out that this incident exemplifies what is wrong with medical and policing systems tied together within an 1819 policing blueprint, a blueprint which is based upon the centuries-old practices of maintaining white power and control over black and brown bodies to protect white interests, perspectives, and property.
In this instance, she says, quote, "The patient is forced to get out of the presumed contract of care through what appears to be the practice of white fragility, white anxiety, negative racial stereotyping, heightened anti-blackness, and moral character labeling of something being wrong with him, which led them to set aside any attempt at assessing any further medical diagnosis the patient may have been suffering with. All attempts to mitigate or attempt care were halted. The patient was forced out of the contract of care through the use of institutional power and the threat of assumed police violence if he did not comply. The police were used as bouncers
and personal bodyguards instead of the public servants they are contracted to be. The presumed contract was ended through transferring victimhood and, in fact, blaming the victim for their own oppression, Reverend Brown added. To be clear, the person who is unable to breathe and having the medical emergency is the victim, not the person caring for them. At the City of Rochester's January 11th press conference, Mayor Malik Evans announced news of the November 30th event and requested internal investigations by the New York State Department of Health Bureau of EMS and Trauma Systems. We support the mayor in his call for an investigation and make an additional renewed call for a local and state-supported process of creating a new and policing and EMS blueprint that was submitted in 2020 to Mayor Lovely Warren in response to the murder of Daniel Prude. Let's take it off the shelf and put it into action, implementing it with fidelity. We end our silence and replace it with a demand for explanations, accountability, a transformational system of EMS and policing that has a clear pathway for public safety and community health care for all.